The relentless downpour matched Ethan Carter's mood as he trudged across Briarwood University's quad, his threadbare jacket doing little to keep him dry. At 24, he should have been worrying about his constitutional law midterm, not whether his mother would lose the family bakery by month's end. The weight of his father's debts pressed down on him like the storm clouds overhead. Medical bills from the cancer treatments, the second mortgage, the loans taken out in desperation during those final months. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another email from First National Bank. He didn't need to open it to know what it said, the same thing all the others had said. Final notice. Immediate payment required. The numbers swam before his eyes as he ducked into the campus coffee shop, the warm air hitting his face like a physical relief. "Black coffee, please," he muttered to the barista, fishing out the last of his crumpled dollar bills. His hands shook slightly as he accepted the chipped mug, whether from the cold or the constant gnawing anxiety. He couldn't tell. The coffee burned his tongue, but he welcomed the pain. At least it was something real, something immediate to focus on instead of the ever-tightening financial noose. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from an unknown number. Ethan Carter speaking. He answered automatically, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Mr. Carter." The woman's voice was crisp, polished, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd never worried about where their next meal was coming from. "This is Victoria Kensington. I'd like to discuss your financial situation." Ethan stiffened, his fingers tightening around the phone. "I'm sorry, who? How did you get this number?" "I make it my business to know things," the woman, Victoria, replied smoothly. "Meet me at the Oakmont at 7 o'clock this evening. Don't be late." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. He stared at his phone, his coffee forgotten. The Oakmont was the most exclusive restaurant in Briarwood, the kind of place where the appetizers cost more than his weekly grocery budget. What could this woman possibly want with him? The rain had lightened to a drizzle by the time Ethan arrived at the Oakmont that evening. He'd borrowed a passable jacket from his roommate and spent 20 minutes trying to tame his dark curls into something resembling presentable. The maitre d' eyed his scuffed dress shoes with barely concealed disdain before leading him to a private dining room in the back. Victoria Kensington sat at the head of an ornate mahogany table, her silver hair coiled into an elegant chignon, her navy suit looking like it cost more than Ethan's tuition. She regarded him with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, the slight fraying at his cuffs, the way his shoulders hunched slightly under her scrutiny. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the chair across from her. Ethan Saturday Victoria signaled to a waiter who materialized at her elbow. "The usual. And for him, the filet, medium rare. He looks like he hasn't had a proper meal in weeks." Ethan's face burned, but he couldn't deny the truth of her words. Ramen noodles and cafeteria food had been his diet for months now. "Miss Kensington he began. "Victoria," she corrected, sipping her wine. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries. I'll get straight to the point. I'm prepared to pay off all your debts." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "All of them. Every last cent. Your student loans, your mother's mortgage, even those rather creative credit card arrangements you've made." She slid a folder across the table. Ethan opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were copies of every financial document he'd ever signed. Loan agreements, hospital bills, even the payday advance he'd taken out last month. His stomach twisted. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why would you do this?" Victoria set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "Because I require a husband." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and absurd. Ethan actually laughed, the sound sharp and disbelieving. "You're joking." "I assure you, Mr. Carter, I never joke about business matters." She produced another document from her briefcase, a contract. "A 5-year marriage, strictly platonic and contractual. You'll live at my estate, attend social functions as my husband, and maintain certain appearances. In return, I'll clear every debt you've accumulated, including those your father left behind." Ethan's mouth went dry. He scanned the contract, the numbers swimming before his eyes. It was more money than he'd ever seen in one place, enough to solve all his problems with room to spare. "Why me?" he asked hoarsely. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because you're intelligent enough to understand the opportunity, desperate enough to accept it, and," she paused, tilting her head, "you have just enough of your father's looks to make this believable." The mention of his father sent a chill down Ethan's spine. You knew my dad. We moved in similar circles, Victoria said smoothly, though something flickered in her gaze. Do we have an agreement? Ethan stared at the contract, the pen lying beside it like a coiled snake. He thought of his mother crying over the bakery's books last night, of his sister's tuition bill sitting unpaid on his desk, of the eviction notice tucked in his backpack. His hand shook as he reached for the pen. 1 week later, Ethan stood in a near-empty courthouse, repeating vows he didn't mean to a woman he barely knew. No family attended, no friends celebrated, just Victoria's lawyer, a bored judge, and the heavy weight of the gold band now circling his left hand. Congratulations, Mr. Kensington, the lawyer said dryly as they exited the courtroom. Victoria didn't even glance at him as they walked to the waiting town car. We have a gala at the country club tonight. Graves will show you to your room and help you prepare. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but the slam of the car door cut him off. The Kensington estate loomed at the end of a winding driveway, its Gothic spires piercing the twilight sky. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and old money. A stern-faced butler, Graves, presumably, waited in the marble foyer. Your quarters are on the second floor, sir, Graves intoned, leading Ethan up a sweeping staircase. Miss Kensington expects you ready by 8. The quarters turned out to be a suite larger than Ethan's entire apartment, complete with a 4-poster bed and a walk-in closet already stocked with tailored suits. A tuxedo lay spread across the duvet, along with a note in Victoria's precise handwriting. Don't embarrass me. Ethan sank onto the bed, his head in his hands. The reality of what he'd done crashed over him like a wave. He'd sold himself, his name, his freedom, maybe even his soul, to a stranger. And as he fingered the unfamiliar wedding band, one thought echoed in his mind. What have I gotten myself into? The gala was a blur of crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes, of 2 white smiles and hands that gripped his just a second too long. Ethan moved through the crowd like a ghost in his rented tuxedo, Victoria's fingers digging into his elbow whenever he hesitated too long before answering a question. Smile, darling, she murmured through clenched teeth as an older couple approached. The Winthrops donate 6 figures annually to my charities. Ethan forced his lips upward. The charade was exhausting. Ah, the new Mr. Kensington, boomed a silver-haired man with a grip like iron. Robert Winthrop. Charles and I were golf partners for 20 years. Terrible tragedy, his passing. Ethan's skin prickled. Charles. Victoria's nails became claws in his arm. My late husband, she said smoothly. Darling, the mayor wants to meet you. She steered him away before he could respond. That night, Ethan lay awake in his luxurious prison, the mansion creaking around him. Somewhere around 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep and wandered the halls, running his fingers along the wainscoting. The house felt alive in the dark, whispering secrets through its floorboards. A locked door at the end of the east wing caught his attention. Unlike the others, this one had no placard, no identifying mark. The handle turned slightly but stuck fast. From inside, a muffled sound. Was that crying? Ethan pressed his ear to the cool wood. Should have seen him tonight, Charles. The resemblance is uncanny. Victoria's voice, but unlike he'd ever heard it. Raw, unguarded. I'll make him understand. I'll make them all pay. A floorboard creaked behind him. Mr. Kensington. Ethan whirled to find Graves holding a silver tea tray, his expression unreadable in the dim light. You're up rather late. I couldn't sleep. Graves' eyes flicked to the locked door. Some rooms are best left undisturbed, sir. The next morning, over breakfast in the sunlit conservatory, Ethan tried to broach the subject. Who is Charles? Victoria's fork froze mid-bite. The sunlight through the windows turned her hair to mercury. My husband. He passed 5 years ago. What happened? The silence stretched so long Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. Then, business complications. She set down her cutlery with surgical precision. We have a board meeting at Kensington Enterprises today. We're the Navy's suit. The dismissal was clear. Kensington Enterprises occupied the top 15 floors of Briarwood's tallest building. As they rode the elevator up, Ethan studied his reflection in the polished doors, the sharp cut of his suit, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape. He looked like a Kensington. He felt like an imposter. Stay quiet and observe, Victoria murmured as the doors opened. These vultures can smell weakness. The boardroom was all glass and cold light. 12 pairs of eyes tracked Ethan as Victoria introduced him. "My husband will be taking an active role in company affairs," she announced, her hand possessive on his shoulder. The beefy man with a ruddy complexion, Ethan recognized him as Winthrop from the gala, leaned forward. "Bit young for mergers and acquisitions, isn't he?" Victoria's smile could have frozen hell. "Ethan graduated top of his class at Briarwood Law. I trust his instincts implicitly." The meeting passed in a haze of jargon and veiled hostility. Afterward, as they waited for the elevator, Winthrop cornered Ethan near the restrooms. "Word of advice, kid," he breathed, whiskey sharp on his tongue. "Victoria's a black widow. Charles wasn't her first husband, just the richest." His beady eyes gleamed. "Sleep with one eye open." The ride home was silent. Victoria stared out the tinted windows, her profile carved from ice. That night, Ethan Googled Charles Kensington death on his phone. The headline made his blood run cold. "Prominent businessman's fatal fall ruled suicide." The accompanying photo showed a man in his late 50s, handsome, distinguished, with Ethan's same strong jawline. The article mentioned financial difficulties and a failed joint venture with local construction firm Carter and Sons. Carter and Sons, his father's company. Ethan's hands shook as he dug deeper. The business section archives revealed the full story. 20 years ago, Charles Kensington and James Carter had partnered on a luxury housing development. When the project collapsed amid allegations of embezzlement, Kensington lost everything. 6 months later, he jumped from his office window, and now Ethan was living in the man's house, wearing his name. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. This wasn't a marriage. It was revenge that he needed proof. The next afternoon, while Victoria was at a charity luncheon, Ethan picked the lock to her study. The room smelled of leather and expensive perfume. Her desk yielded nothing, just mundane business files and household accounts. Then he noticed it. A nearly invisible seam along the bookshelf. The hidden panel opened with a soft click. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a manila folder. The journal's pages were filled with Victoria's precise script, chronicling her investigation into his father's dealings. But it was the folder that stopped Ethan's heart. Inside were photos of him, at campus, at his mother's bakery, even one of him visiting his father's grave last year. All dated months before their first meeting, and beneath them, a single handwritten note. "James Carter stole my husband's life. Now his son will repay the debt." A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Ethan barely had time to shove the folder back before the study door opened. Victoria stood framed in the doorway, her red lipstick like a wound against her pale face. "Looking for something, darling?" Ethan's fingers froze on the hidden compartment as Victoria's shadow stretched across the study's Persian rug. Moonlight through the bay window caught the silver streaks in her hair, turning them to mercury. "Just admiring your collection," he said, forcing his voice steady as he closed the panel. "First editions?" Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. She moved to the liquor cabinet, the ice clinking like bones in her glass. "You've been asking about Charles." A statement, not a question. Ethan's pulse hammered in his throat. "I think I deserve to know why you really married me." Victoria sipped her scotch, the amber liquid catching the light. "Your father stole $3 million from our joint venture. Left Charles drowning in lawsuits." Her manicured nail traced the rim of her glass. "The morning he jumped, he called me from his office. Said James Carter had won." Ethan's stomach twisted. "So this is revenge." "Justice," she corrected. She set down her drink and opened a desk drawer, withdrawing a yellowed envelope. "Read it." The letter inside was in his father's handwriting, one Ethan hadn't seen in 8 years. "Charles, the money's gone. The investors want blood. That I'm sorry." That Ethan's vision blurred. "This doesn't prove anything." Victoria produced a second document, a forensic audit showing transfers to an offshore account in his father's name. "He framed my husband for embezzlement. The scandal destroyed Charles long before the fall did." The room tilted. Ethan gripped the desk edge. His father had been many things: stubborn, proud, occasionally reckless, but not a thief. Yet the evidence glared up at him in damning black and white. "And marrying me fixes this, how?" Victoria's laugh was razor-edged. The Kensington name was soiled. "I spent years rebuilding our reputation through charities, board seats." Her gaze pinned him. But old money respects tradition. A grieving widow needs a husband, preferably one tied to the scandal, living proof of my magnanimity. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. You're using me to legitimize yourself. And you're using me to escape poverty. She shrugged. A fair trade. Except it wasn't. Not when Ethan noticed the dates on those offshore transfers. 6 months after his father's death. He said nothing that night. But when Victoria left for her morning Pilates class, he went straight to Graves' quarters. The butler answered in a worn dressing gown, his eyes wary. "Sir, who really embezzled that money?" Ethan demanded, shoving the audit report at him. Graves' throat worked. "I served the Kensingtons 30 years. Charles was not himself near the end." He lowered his voice. "There were rumors of gambling debts. Bad ones." Ethan's law training kicked in. Where would Victoria keep financial records from that period? Graves hesitated, then whispered, "Safety deposit box. First National, under her maiden name." The bank manager balked until Ethan played his trump card, his wedding band glinting in the fluorescent light. "As her husband, I have legal access." The box contained a trove of damning evidence. Canceled checks to a known mob associate, Charles' psychiatric records detailing a gambling addiction, a handwritten ledger showing withdrawals matching the embezzled amounts, but the smoking gun was a letter from Charles to Victoria. "I can't stop. The debts are too deep when they come for me." No, it was never James. Ethan photographed everything. Then he made 2 stops, first to his old law professor for advice, then to Daniel's apartment with the evidence. "It's enough to prove your father was framed," Daniel said, spreading the documents across his kitchen table. "But Victoria's got half the judiciary in her pocket. We need leverage." Ethan tapped the mob-linked checks. "These were paid from charity funds. That's federal fraud." Daniel grinned. "Let's call the DA." Victoria was hosting a garden party when the FBI arrived. Ethan watched from the terrace as agents moved through the hydrangea bushes, their dark suits jarring against the pastel dresses. Victoria's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the flagstones. "You," she breathed, whirling on Ethan, that he met her gaze squarely. "You should have left my father's name out of your lies." They led her away in handcuffs, the society pages snapping photos. As the town car pulled out, Ethan noticed Graves watching from an upstairs window, an unreadable expression on his face. 6 months later, the Kensington estate sold at auction for $12.3 million. Ethan took his half to 3 places. First National Bank, finally paying off his mother's mortgage in full. Briarwood General Hospital, settling his father's medical debts, the charities Victoria had robbed. Anonymous donations with one stipulation: plaques reading, "In memory of Charles Kensington." On the day of Victoria's sentencing, Ethan stood in the back of the courtroom as the judge handed down a 7-year term for wire fraud and tax evasion. She looked smaller in prison khaki, her famous poise crumbling when she spotted him. 8 marshals led her out. She managed one last icy glare. "This isn't over." Ethan just turned away to epilogue. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded from his new apartment. "Cream stationery, no return address." "Ethan, I was wrong about your father, but not about you. You fight dirtier than James ever did. I almost respect that." "Victoria," he burned it in the sink, watching the flames curl the edges to ash. Some legacies, he decided, weren't worth keeping. Downstairs, his mother's bakery buzzed with customers, the bell jingling merrily as he walked in. "Table in the corner's free, Mr. Hotshot Lawyer," she teased, flour dusting her apron. Ethan smiled, breathing in the scent of fresh bread and second chances. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of resilience, redemption, and forgiveness. Ethan's story reminds us that even in the face of betrayal and hardship, the choices we make can lead us to healing and new beginnings. If this story touched your heart and left you inspired, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and loved ones. Let's spread the message of hope and second chances far and wide. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Comeback Tales for more heartfelt tales that move your soul and remind us all of the power of compassion, forgiveness, and love. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with another soul-stirring story. Until then, take care, and remember to cherish the lessons life brings.